The next section that we're going to be looking at is called State My Path. Here's the good news. We have now moved past the part where we are preparing to have the conversation. We're actually getting the opportunity to actually start having the conversation with someone now. To start this off, though, I want to read this quote up here from Ron McMillan. It says, "You can argue as strongly as you want for your opinion as long as you are equally vigorous in encouraging others to disagree." I'm not going to talk about this quote yet, but I just want you to remember that and keep that in the back of your mind because we're going to come back to it here in just a few minutes. So for this next section, the problem that we're focused on is during a crucial conversation, most of the time, when we actually start to open our mouths and speak, we tend to say things in exactly the wrong way. So the solution is to learn a framework, a skill, that will actually help us be able to present our material, add our meaning to the pool of shared meaning in a way that actually allows the other person to be open to it and not get defensive or start to put up their walls and not be able to hear what it is that we had to say. So in our model, where we are right now, just as I mentioned, as we moved out of the top section, we're now into this middle part right here. And specifically, we're looking at how we can actually provide our meaning into the pool of shared meaning and how we can present our thoughts, perspectives, ideas, and feelings. So to start this off, what we're going to get a chance to do is we're going to watch this video, and in this first one, we're going to see Scott interacting with Michelle. And yes, it's another video where, unfortunately, Michelle is not having that amazing of an interaction with someone. I don't know why. I guess they just chose Michelle a lot to be like the brunt of a lot of these sorts of things. Yeah. But you'll see, she handles it very professionally, more or less. Anyway, in this one, Scott is going to come in and he is going to be frustrated. He's going to have something that he wants to talk to Michelle about. And let's go ahead and take a look at how he actually handles that.
Hi, Michelle. I have this really important rush. What's with you, anyway?
What do you mean?
Oh, come on. You know what I mean.
Actually, I don't.
Every time I come in here, you're either surfing the web, you're playing a video game, you're on a personal call, you're texting your friends, and when you're not wasting time with personal business, you manage to look busy, but don't do much.
That's what you think of me?
Well, that's the good part. Bad part is that when you do eventually get around to working, you only work on projects that you like working on. You put off all the other jobs. So I think that when I have something for you to do for me, that it'll probably get delayed, or worse, it won't get done at all.
That's really what you think of me.
It's not all, but it's a start.
Well, here's a news flash. I'm not going to take your verbal abuse or your groundless insults any longer, okay?
At least you know where I stand.
All right, so how effective was how Scott handled this? Not very effective. No. So what do you think the consequences of the way he handled it are going to be?
Well, if they had a conflict before, they certainly have one now.
Yeah, that's true. They're probably not going to be able to interact very effectively even later on, right? Like Michelle's probably not going to work with him. And you notice when he came in, his problem was that he has things that he needs heard in order to deliver for him. And probably after this conversation, she's probably not going to be any better at actually delivering those things for him or be any more motivated to deliver those things for him. So he's still not getting what it is that he needs from her as a result of this conversation. So let's go ahead and see a different way that he could have handled it. I want you to think about what are the differences that you notice between the first way that Scott handled it and the second way.
Hi, Michelle. I have this really important rush job that I need you to... Could we talk about something that's starting to bother me?
Sure. What's up?
You know that I'm fairly new around here, and I'm finding it difficult to get some of my work done. As I've thought about what might help, I realized I ought to talk to you about something that's starting to get in the way. Would that be okay?
Whoa, I guess you're having the small talk, are you?
I wouldn't say anything, really, but I'm feeling stressed. As I mentioned, some of my work requires help from you to get done, and it seems like the last few times that I've come in here, you've been working on something other than your job. One time it was the internet, another time a game. you've closed your screen and put things away in the past as I've approached you.
So, what are you saying? I don't work?
Actually, I don't know what to think. I just know that when you quickly put things away or snap your screen closed, it kind of makes me think that you're trying to cover up something.
I can see how it would.
Oh, and to make matters worse, last week when I came to find out how my job was coming, twice you couldn't find the work orders. I'm beginning to think that maybe at best you're a little bit disorganized, and at worst, maybe you're just not working very hard. If I'm off base or I'm being unfair, I'd like to know.
We're into crazy deadlines, so we tend to work in fits and starts. Sometimes we're working full out, other times.
And now they've been able to enter dialogue. So what are some differences between the way Scott handled it the first time and the second time?
He stays with fact.
Hmm.
He mentioned things as very fact-based. I realized that you're putting things away, you close your computer. These are the facts.
Yeah.
He also invites her in for the discussion. Is it okay if I can, and I have seen, and would it be?
He asked for permission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very inviting, right? It's this idea of, it's not just him saying to her, here's what I have to say. It's actually inviting her in to have a conversation with him about what it is that he has noticed, those facts that he's observed.
And he's not raising his voice.
Yeah, he's staying very calm. Yeah.
His body language is much different. So he takes a position, he sits, he opens.
Yeah.
I think he showed his vulnerability also.
Yes.
I'm sorry, say that again?
He showed his vulnerability.
Yeah, there was a little bit of his humanity that was
Otherwise,
shown.
like, he came across as a manager, or I don't know, is he manager?
They're just, they're coworkers, they're colleagues, yeah.
But this time he said, I'm new, I need help, and that got the other person into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. That helps you break down a little bit of those walls too, right? To show a little bit of vulnerability on our part and actually let the other person know that we need them, we want to work with them.
Yeah, and he insists as well on his feelings, so he doesn't say this is a fact, this is my feeling.
Yes.
I feel about and so on.
There was a very clear distinction between here are the facts, here are the things I've observed, and here are kind of the emotions, here's the thoughts that I have about those facts. Yeah.
And he's asking her for, validate what he's seeing. Is it, am I seeing the right things? Am I not seeing,
Yeah.
Am I mistaken?
Exactly. He's asking or inviting her to kind of challenge his perspective on that and provide him a little bit more context around that. Yeah. Metaphorically speaking, the way I always kind of like to think about this is, in these crucial conversations that we have, instinctually we go to a place where it's adversarial, where it's us versus them, and we're kind of facing off against the person. And what's really great about this skill is what it does is it takes that person and takes them out of that position of being across from us in an adversarial opposing position and kind of brings them next to us in a collaborative place where we together can now move forward in the direction that we want to go. And everything that you guys mentioned are actually part of the skill that we're going to be looking at to help us be able to have these kinds of conversations more effectively. And the skill is specifically called State My Path, and it's 5 steps to help us be able to deliver our message in a way that allows the other person to remain open to hearing it.
I have one question. So this is a situation, it's very good case. Yeah, we can see the people is from up to stand up and talking like that. Now they are equal and sit down talking each other and inviting. This is the case in the face-to-face in the office. Now more and more for us is virtually working each other by email or by telephone. For example, our vivid case is people said I'm on global call, so you should give me this as soon as possible. We have 15 hours time difference. So as soon as possible means the whole team should working for this short notice in the whole night, stay whole night, whole team. So this kind of situation is, I always think about we have no time to invite and list on the phone call.
Sure.
Yeah, call from US. He said last before similar, so invite your situation and show our empathy. So maybe in the call is difficult to do the whole process. So how can we quickly?
Yeah, so just to make sure I understand what you're saying, because of the fact that you're working virtually and people are in different time zones, there isn't necessarily as much time to be able to actually go through a whole process like this in your conversations. Plus, to add on top of that, you're also communicating mostly through email or phone calls. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing that I would say is depending on the intensity of the conversation that you need to have with someone, like if it's a pretty significant problem, it might be worth trying to find some time to actually sit down on a one-on-one, at least phone call with them to be able to talk it out. But let me ask you this: in general, when you're facing situations where it's just over email or over phone calls, how do you tend to handle those types of situations in terms of your communication?
I think this time-sensitive nature of this situation stems from the fact that there's something they need to deliver like within a few hours, right? So going back to the CPR concept, is you probably need to deal with the content first, and later on, when the dust settles, you deal with the relationship portion of this. And I wouldn't have that conversation over the phone. And maybe it's impossible if that other person is in a different geo, but maybe you can do like a telepresence meeting, right? Where you can see the other person's body.
Makes all the difference in the world.
You can see.
Once you've connected even 2 times, 3 times, and established that relationship, you see that person's face, you see their reaction, you know they're a person on the other side.
Yeah.
The phone calls become completely different.
Yeah.
It's totally changed the way our relationships work. It's been the best thing.
I agree.
We do everything on FaceTime, and we do it with our India team, we do it with our China team. It really makes all the difference.
Is that what you were going to talk about as well?
Yeah. For me, it's often what it's about emails, because you mentioned emails too, right? And because it's so fast, you write a fast answer. And what we've discussed a lot in the Copenhagen office, where we have lots of nationalities, but also working with our colleagues around the world, is there's sometimes a culture thing in how you communicate. So, for example, if I get email from American peers, it can be Monica, please send. No hi and how are you and so on.
Very straightforward.
Whereas if I get an email from a French colleague, there will be for sure 1 or 2 lines saying how are you and so on. And actually they consider it very rude to just Monica, so
there's a little bit of small talk, if you will.
Yeah. So sometimes that's just like a cultural example, but there are other examples where you get upset about something, and then typically, I would not pretend to do otherwise, you do a fast response like,
yeah.
And then it goes in your, what was it, the
Spiral.
spiral,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's where you sometimes just have to stop and say, okay, I'll call the person, because hopefully it's just a misunderstanding.
Because when we're talking about emails, like, things can get blown out of proportion when it comes to emails so quickly, right? Because we don't have a lot of information to work from. So we end up telling ourselves stories based on a very, very small amount of content. Plus, we don't have the benefit of body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, and things like that. Yeah. So that can really gum up the works pretty quickly if we're not careful.
I've seen one, our HR manager in Smith. His email, the small note, this is caption at the bottom of the mail. After 3 mails, let's stop.
Oh, okay. Is that kind of just a rule of thumb?
Yeah, because
okay.
Too much of mail happens and he says stop.
Oh,
so he's kept that as a
I use that all the time.
after 3 minutes, let's stop.
Very effective.
I like that, yeah. Or it's this idea, it's like, clearly this issue is too big for us to handle over email because we've had to respond 3 times, so let's just handle it over a phone
And
call.
emails are
That's
still
great.
less sensitive actually. Phone call is still better.
So here's the one other thing I would say about emails as well, is that this framework that we're about to go through and talk about, this actually can be applied to when you're writing your emails as well. As we're talking about kind of the 3 primary steps that go into this, you can actually use those steps in your email and even break it out by like lines so that it's very clear, at least for you, that you are kind of going through this 3-step process. With that being said, email's definitely not the best form of communication when you're having a crucial conversation. In fact, I would even say if you truly are having a crucial conversation, one with our high stakes, our opposing opinions, and our strong emotions, then do not have the conversation over email. At least have the conversation over the phone. If you can do something like Facebook, that would be even more beneficial. Yeah. And still try to use these communication skills as best you can, even if you are just writing an email. So, does that help? Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, so what I learned is move email, difficult email, to a call, a quick call, and then move to a call, transfer a call to a FaceTime, try to see each other. Even some, not so clear, but it's better to see some face or body language.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have Skype for business too. Yeah. Because that works really well.
Does that work with video?
Yeah.
So I think Marion's point is important one, so
Yeah,
you deal with the content
Apple
there,
have
They
real
just
time,
turned
yeah,
it
can
on.
see.
And then
next deal with the big
Yeah, you should.
Yeah. Yeah.
And WebEx video works very well.
It sounds like we had a couple conversations. I want to make sure I hear all of them. So you were saying that for the bigger for content issues.
I think for the situation that Lou was in, the key with Baron said was deal with the content specific problem there, and then take the bigger repetition or whatever it is offline for later on.
Make that a one-on-one conversation. Okay, yeah, absolutely. And then what were you guys talking about over here?
Just ways to, so Skype, WebEx has video integrated in it, we all use it. And actually it has a functionality where when we have our meetings, we see 6 different sites. So you can have 6 windows up at
And
once.
WebEx.
Oh, great. Okay, excellent. Yeah.
So challenge with WebEx is if you're taking a 5:30 call, AM, 5:30 AM, you don't want to see people to see you.
Oh, that's right. It's like, no, we're just doing audio. You do not want to look at this.
I'm not wearing any pants. Put the camera here.
Right. All right, so let's.
Also on the
yeah.
I think one of the things I've seen some of the leaders using effectively is instead of marking the mail to 100 people on the CC, they mark it to you alone. That shows you the seriousness of it, and it makes it more personal.
All of a sudden, it's like, oh, okay, we are having a one-on-one conversation, even if it is over.
Yeah, otherwise, like marking to 10 people and 15 people in CC.
Yeah, then it's just kind of like, oh, this isn't about me. I don't need to worry about
And
this.
if it's with that urgency, it's
Yeah.
No, but also the other way around. If it gets really tough and there is some blame in it, and maybe for good reasons, but then take people off the
Yes.
scene,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
make them part of
The
Yeah,
conversation.
instead of having a conversation in the hallway, take it in the room kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Great way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and get into our skill here. So this is so it's called State My Path, and you can see that STATE is our acronym, and it's broken into kind of 2 main sections. There are the what skills, and these are actually what we're going to be saying as a part of this framework. And then there are the how skills, and these how skills are specifically about how we are saying what it is that we're saying. So it's a 3-step process that's done in this way. So let's look at this step by step here. Let's start with number 1, share your facts. So why do you think it's important to start with your facts when you're beginning a crucial conversation?
It's some common ground that you can reach agreement upon before you go to your own version of the story.
Right. It's establishing this is what we're talking about. This is the facts of the situation. This is what I observed. This is what I noticed. Before we're actually getting into our interpretation or anything like that, it's like you said, just setting that groundwork, creating a framework that both we and the other person can work from.
And even if you don't have your facts right, then you cannot move your conversation forward. So you can't deny facts.
Yeah, absolutely. Like think about that issue with Scott, right? Where he comes walking in, he says, every single time I come in, you're closing your laptop. Then Michelle might be able to respond with, that's because I work on confidential material, and I'm required to do that anytime someone comes into my queue. So it might be some additional facts for him to understand. Yeah, absolutely.
share your facts. May not be the only fact.
Yes, exactly.
It could be what you are seeing, and from radio seeing that looks to be the fact.
Right, exactly. Because all we have is our own observations, right? What we know to be true. And there might be additional information.
This is how I see it. Could be a way of presenting. This is how I see it.
Right.
Could be wrong.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It reminds me of a case that happened a while ago. Not sure if you guys are familiar with a picture of a dress, whether it's blue or black. oh, it's a white or gold.
Yeah.
So it's the same picture,
Yeah.
but genetically we're engineered so differently. So even if everybody's looking at the same picture, half of the population see it as white and gold, and the other half see it as black and blue.
All are correct.
Exactly. So you're absolutely right. It is our version of the fact, which may or may not be the other person's version.
Yeah, and this is why, going back to our previous example of mastering our stories, this is why it's really important that the facts that we're presenting are indeed facts. Yeah, because when we start to get into things like our understanding of it or our interpretation of it, that starts to become our story. And that's okay, and we're going to get a chance to present that. And we want to make sure that when we are sharing our facts, that we are indeed actually sharing facts, things that we observe, things we notice. Remember our technical definition of a fact, it's something measurable, it's something that is factual and has happened in real life. Yeah. So, again, prior to going into the conversation, making sure that you've mastered your stories and separated your facts from your story will make it easier for you then when you're talking to the person to be able to share actual facts and real facts that you observe. So here's some examples of ways that you can actually share your facts. They say things like, I noticed that the last 3 times we talked about this, I was expecting to receive this at 3 and it's now 4 o'clock. And you can notice how this last one, you're stating a fact around what your expectation was versus what the reality actually was. So a fact is your expectation, but then there may be some interpretation, some frustration, some emotion that comes out of the fact that your expectation didn't actually line up with what really happened. So we talked a little bit about benefits of starting with our facts already. Let's go ahead and look at tell your story. So after we've established what the facts of the situation are, we now have the opportunity to actually share our story. So here's the question. Why do we actually want to share our story? We've given our facts. What's the benefit of being able to actually share our story?
It's easier to flow into the emotions going on. And then just put ourselves out there and let other people provide their perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's carrying your bucket.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's about actually providing all of your perspective, right? And your story, like I was saying yesterday, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just your perspective on the situation. It's your interpretation of the facts. So what that does is that might actually provide a little more context for the person. If the facts alone don't give the person enough of an understanding about why you're upset or why you're having a conversation, you might want to add your story in as well in order to provide that additional context. There was something really cool that actually happened in the second conversation that Scott had with Michelle. At one point, he just said, one time I came in, you were texting. Another time I came in, you were playing a game. Third time you came in, and I came in, you closed your laptop really quickly. And then he just stops talking for a moment. And Michelle actually then comes back with, well, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say I'm not doing my job? And what was really cool about that is he simply provided facts.
Yes.
And those facts were clear enough for them to have a mutual understanding of what his story potentially could be. And so she then kind of had the opportunity to see things from his perspective. Now, it doesn't always work that way where our facts by themselves are going to help the person see our perspective. So then we tell our story in order to be able to provide that additional context and help them see things from our perspective.
Is that what you would recommend, that we pause once we've stated our facts and give the other person an opportunity to kind of put the facts together, or?
My suggestion would be to, in kind of planning out how you're going to actually have the conversation. So, back up here prior to having the conversation is when you're kind of talking through this, to kind of ask yourself, or maybe even run it by someone else and see if the facts alone are going to be enough for the person to understand your perspective. When we're talking about content or pattern issues, sometimes the facts by themselves are enough for the person to understand. Most of the time, I would say when we're dealing with a relationship issue, then we definitely need to tell our story as well, because that will give the person enough information to truly be able to see where we're coming from and help them understand our perspective about the relationship. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
So the last question over here, so how is this story that we're telling right now, how is that different from the clever stories that we were talking about just a little while ago?
It's fact-based.
Okay, say a little bit more about that.
Because we stated fact first and then build a story out of those facts. So
Absolutely.
it's more factual.
Yeah. And how about those clever stories? Why do we tell ourselves those clever stories?
To make ourselves feel better.
Yeah.
Off the hook.
Exactly. The clever stories are about justifying our own bad behavior, and those are stories that we tell ourselves. This is a story that we're telling that about our interpretation of the situation that provide a little more context for that person. Yeah. Great. Okay. So here's some examples of ways that you can actually tell your story. It leads me to conclude that, I believe that, I start to think that. I do have just a little bit of my own personal bias around I believe that, because a belief to me is something that's a little more concrete and that's hard to change. And you'll notice that starting to think that or leading me to conclude that, there's some flexibility there, right? We're leaving it open enough for us to have that story that we're telling change based on what it is that we hear from the other person. Great. So let's move on to step number 3, which is ask for the other's path. So when we're asking for the other person's path, this is our opportunity to now finish what we're saying and now open it up for the other person to be able to share their perspective, to invite them to bring their bucket to the pool of shared meaning. And here's how we want to do this. Number 1, we want to be humble. We actually want to provide the opportunity for them to share their information. We don't want to just kind of force our opinion on them and then close off the conversation. Secondly, we want to fill the pool. We truly want them to be willing to share their perspective and to share what it is that they have to say. So you remember that quote that I read to you right at the beginning of this section? That was about the importance of us being willing to share our perspective, but us having equal amount of commitment in hearing the other person's perspective and hearing them challenge our point of view. That's what the question that we're asking is about. This is about giving that person the opportunity and inviting them to challenge the story that we've told and give us a different perspective, to give us a different point of view, and being open to what it is that they actually are sharing with us. So let's go ahead and just look at some effective questions versus ineffective questions. So on the effective side, we've got how do you see it? Can you help me better understand? What's your point of view? Under ineffective, we have, isn't that the case? What can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? No one disagrees with that, do they? What are the differences between these questions?
Open-ended versus closed-ended.
The open-ended questions are the
Effective.
Yeah, exactly. Those effective questions, they're about opening up dialogue, getting the other person to share their perspective. What else? What's another difference?
How the second
It's not.
ineffective?
That's not a closed question.
Yeah,
That's the only.
That's open-ended, right? What can we do to make sure?
Okay, so let's talk about this one.
Why
What
is
do we
that
do to make
ineffective?
sure this doesn't happen again? Why do you think this is an ineffective question?
So,
Yeah, because
Your brain don't-
assume that it is happening.
Okay, so it makes an assumption that what we have said so far is accurate and is true, and that's the problem that needs to be fixed. And I'll give you guys a little bit of an inside perspective here. This is the trap that we often fall into with these questions. Is we feel like, oh, I've done such a great job of sharing my facts and telling my story that of course they're gonna see things from my perspective. So now we can jump immediately to asking a question about how to solve this problem. And that's not what we're trying to do with this question. We do want to eventually get to a point where we together are solving the problem. But before we get there, we have to understand what the other person's perspective is. But if our question immediately makes the assumption that this is a problem and that problem needs a solution, we might be cutting off the opportunity for that person to help us see things from their point of view. So we're going to be checking in on that a little bit later while you guys are practicing that. Because the third step, the question part, is simultaneously the easiest part because it's just one question, it's one line, it's one thing that you say, but it's also sometimes the hardest part because we can very easily fall into that trap.
Yeah, I've done that so many times.
Yeah. And how does the person respond when that happens?
Doesn't usually go the way you want it.
No. They might get a little defensive, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's now look at how we're actually going to have this conversation. So we share our facts, we tell our story, we ask our others' paths, and we do this by, number one, talking tentatively. So talking tentatively means a couple of different things. It means, number one, telling our story as a story and not as a fact. So being really clear that we aren't presenting our story in such a way where we really truly believe that it's true, but instead that it's something that we think or a perspective that we have, and that we're open to hearing the other person's perspective. We're open to them challenging what it is that we have assumed about this. Second, allowing room for the other person's stories to be shared as well. Because they're going to have stories that they're telling themselves as well, and we need to do the best job that we can to see things from their perspective. And then the third is avoid absolutes. And I'll tell you what, this is one that I used to fall into all the time. Like, I would come home from work, I'd walk into the kitchen, the dishes wouldn't be done, and I'd be so frustrated. I would say to my wife, you know what, you never do the dishes. And she would say, that's not true. I did that one plate 5 years ago in January. Remember that? That one plate that I washed? Yeah, see, so you can't say that I never do the dishes, because I definitely do the dishes sometimes. And all of a sudden, my statement is just kind of thrown out the window. So when we use those absolutes, it creates a little bit of defensiveness, because now that person can find that one example that refutes what you've already said. So allowing, for there to be a little bit of wiggle room in what you're saying. What questions do you have about that? About talking tentatively?
I've seen that sometimes people tell their stories and ask the other person to, or give option for the other person to tell, but you're not listening. The other person to share.
Yeah.
You've done your job, you did your part, and you gave the other person to talk, but you're not listening when the person is giving you the response.
Yeah.
And you're very eager to get to the next stage.
Exactly. I was going to say, what happens when we don't actually hear what the other person's perspective is?
You got probe further.
The dialogue gets kind of shut down, right? Yeah. You get to that point where you haven't heard what they've had to say, so you're still just barreling forward to the solution that you want to come to based on your perspective, and you're not fully, truly appreciating what the other person's point of view is. Yeah. And that's part of talking tentatively as well, because this is our way of making sure that the person understands that we're open to hearing what they have to say, and we want to encourage them to give us their perspective. And in fact, that is the second, well actually, before we get to that, the ways that we can be both not tentative enough and just the right amount of tentative is through statements like this. So too forceful are by saying things, the fact of the matter is, that's a dumb idea, the only reasonable option is to, and if I agree with you, then we both be wrong. I feel like that last one might be a little bit of a joke. I hope nobody's ever actually said that. But you can see how all of those statements, they shut down dialogue, they shut down the conversation, because you're being too forceful and you're not allowing space for the other person to share their point of view. Where things on the more tentative side are, in my opinion, maybe it would make sense to, I believe that what we should do is, and I'm wondering if that example applies to our company. There's flexibility, there's your point of view, but it's allowing for the other person to share their perspective as well. So the other way in which we actually want to deliver our message is by encouraging testing. And we already talked about this a little bit already. But remember that in delivering and in stating our path, what our purpose is to not only share our perspective, but also to open it up for the other person to share their perspective as well. So we want to get more meaning into the pool. We want to get their meaning as well as our own. As it says, if our goal is to convince, compel, or control, you'll do a good job of speaking your mind and a poor job of encouraging others. So going back to your point about not actually listening to what they have to say, part of encouraging testing is actually being open to hearing what it is that they have to say. I'll tell you what too, this is something that I tend to have a little bit of a challenge with myself, and that I continue to work on in my own practice of these skills, because I find what I'll do is I'll state my path really well and I'll ask a really great question, and then the person might come back and say, and give their perspective, and that perspective might include some responsibility that I have to take in the situation. And my automatic kind of knee-jerk response is to want to defend myself, right? Is to want to say, oh, wait, no, let me tell you why you're wrong, and give you a little bit of a different understanding of what you, and let you know why what you said isn't quite accurate. And what I find that when that happens, when I do that, is it kind of shuts the person down. It kind of lets them know, like, yeah, I just asked for you to share me your perspective, and now I'm telling you why your perspective is wrong. So there is a certain level of humility that we need to have and being willing to listen to what their perspective is. Whether we think it's right or wrong or not, we need to be open to hearing what that perspective is. Okay. Our only limit to how strong we can express our opinion is our willingness to be equally vigorous and encouraging others to challenge it. I wanted to bring this quote back to you one more time because I think it's really, really important. We have to be equally willing to share our opinion and hear the other person's opinion in order for our dialogues to be as effective as they can be. So now, of course, we're going to give you an opportunity to actually practice this skill. We're going to give you some scenarios to help you practice it. But before we get to those scenarios, we're going to set this up and we're going to do this in kind of a unique way. And that way is what we call the strange three-headed coworker. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 30 seconds, and in those 30 seconds, I want you to stand up, find a group of 3 people that you haven't worked with so far, and find a new seat in the room. And I think we're going to have 3 groups of 3 and 1 group of 4. So 30 seconds, find your groups, sit down, wait for further instructions. Go.
Everyone stands up.
Then we're all just going to like rotate around and get some
Yeah.
Okay.
But you guys have worked together. I don't know what that.
Who does not have a group so far? Got 1, we got 2. Do we have a group? Do we have our group of 4? Okay, so we have a group of 4 here. We got 2 here. Who still doesn't have a group? I see another group of 4 right here.
3. I could join those 2.
Come on over then. All right, great.
Oh, Luke.
Sorry.
We'll give you a chance to work with him again later.
Okay.
I feel bad.
All right. So now that you're with your team, it's going to be either next workshop or 4. That's fine. All right. So now that you have your group of 3, or 4, here's what we're going to do. I want you to label 1 person in your group facts, 1 person story, and 1 person acts. If you're in that group of 4, you're always going to have 1 extra person. So just for now, 1 person's facts, 1 person's acts, 1 person's story. Real quick, decide who is which.
Alright.
Facts. Story, ask.
Okay. Who are my facts people?
Ask.
Story. Okay.
Who are my facts people? Awesome. All right. Who's my story persons? All right. And who are my ask people? I'd be very careful and enunciate ask people, otherwise it sounds very bad. Yeah. All right. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to be shown a problem that you, as a 3-headed coworker, is going to need to handle, and you are going to. You're actually, as 1 person, going to bring this situation up with the person in the scenario. So think of yourself as 1 entity, 1 person who has 3 heads. 1 head's really good at stating facts, 1 head is really good at telling your story, and 1 head is really, really good at asking questions. Looks a little something like this. So you see, you are 1 person and you are speaking to 1 other person. So, we're going to give you a scenario. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to use CPR to actually decide, are we having a content conversation, a pattern conversation, or a relationship conversation. Then, once you've done that, you're actually going to develop a script. You're actually going to write out for yourself, what are the facts that we want to actually state as part of State Your Path? What's the story that we want to tell? And what's the question that we want to ask? You'll develop this together, because you don't want to have the facts of what you're saying not support the story that you're telling. So together in your teams, you'll write out what your facts are for your facts person, what your story is, and then decide on what an effective question is that you can ask to kind of wrap that up. What questions do you have about what you'll be doing? Excellent. So here's our very first scenario. This one is called the liar. You work with a person who prefers to fib rather than disagree with you. At least that's what you're beginning to conclude.
What does fib mean?
Means to lie. Yeah. You ask her if she will do a certain job. She hesitates. You explain why it needs to be done, and then she agrees, but doesn't do it. This has happened with the last 3 commitments you have gotten from her. Each time she's left you an email or note saying she's sorry, but always after it was too late. You think she's afraid to tell you no, pretends to agree, and then purposely leaves messages so she won't have to tell you face to face. So first, decide, is this a content issue, a pattern issue, or a relationship issue? Then once you've done that, script out the facts, the story, and the ask that you want to use as part of State Your Path. I'll be coming around if you have any questions. Let's go ahead and take about, we'll start with 5 minutes, and then if you need a little bit more time, we can add some more time after that.
It sounds like it's a pattern.
So here's how we're actually going to get to deliver our path, or state our path. I'm going to have these two groups go ahead and pair up, and have these two groups go ahead and pair up. Before you move, here's what's going to happen. I'll have you stand up, and I'll have you face to face with the other groups. You'll have your facts people lined up, your story people lined up, and your ask people lined up. You're then going to get an opportunity to state your path. Here's the thing. I want you to deliver it just as though you're talking to the person in the scenario. Just how you would actually deliver it if you were having this conversation for real. Here's the question. How long do you think it should take you to actually share your facts, tell your story, and ask for the other's paths? How long should that whole thing take?
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
I would say
45 seconds.
Yeah, somewhere between about 45 seconds to 90 seconds, a minute to about a minute and a half. Anything longer than that, and there's probably a little bit more in there that might end up confusing the situation. You want to keep it concise, you want to get right to the point. Because remember, this is just our way of initiating the
We factor
conversation.
in the pause.
The pause. Oh, yeah, there you go. Absolutely, yeah. All right, so I'm going to have these two teams line up. I'll have these two teams line up. I'll give you about
Facing
6
each other,
minutes.
or
What's that?
facts facing one another?
Yeah, just so you know which one is which. Yeah. It'll take about 6 minutes. Once one team has gone, get a little feedback from the other team, and then switch.
There you go. Thank you.
All right, I'll be coming around. All right, go ahead and pause real quick right there.
And then it was the other extreme.
Yes.
So, as I was walking around, I had the opportunity to hear some of the groups going, and something that I noticed was that there was some really open feedback that was being given. I heard people specifically referring to things that you had said and giving some very direct, open, and honest feedback. And that makes me think that you guys are really committed to making sure that each other is able to use this skill really well, and that makes me feel very, very happy about this. So, is there anything else that I could be doing to make sure that you are getting the most that you can out of this experience?
I think it's great.
Great.
It's gonna
Notice,
be practice.
what did I just do right there?
You solicit
Open-ended.
feedback.
No, you gave us the facts.
Give the facts,
Made-
gave you my interpretation.
Yeah, what it made
and
me
then asked
think and
you
what it made me feel.
So, this skill,
We didn't even notice.
All right. Yeah, so this skill, I just do that as a way of illustrating that this skill can be used in a lot of different ways. You can do it to give feedback, you can give it to have a crucial conversation. It's just a really simple framework for communicating what you're noticing and what you're thinking in an effective way. So let me honestly ask you, so how did that process go? Did you guys get some good feedback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Ask or
I'm actually asking that, yeah.
We need to make sure.
Right.
We had a good discussion where we thought the counterparts here were a bit too tough, lots of facts, almost a little bit accusative, but we were probably soft and maybe too soft. So
Yes.
So we discussed
Yeah.
this fine balance. Who are you dealing with here, and how many facts? A lot of facts can be tough on somebody, or with others you need to do it. Otherwise, they'll say, "Oh, that's just two things, right?" So.
That's a really great point. There's a balance in terms of our tentativeness, right? I mean, we don't want to be so tentative that the other person can just push us over and bully us through the conversation. We also don't want to be so harsh that we're putting them in that place. There's a balance to the right level of tentativeness.
Yeah.
We also had a chance to talk a little bit about the facts that you actually used in what you said. Explain to the other group what we actually talked about in terms of that list of facts.
Well, that when you have too many facts, you better select a few.
Yeah.
Rather than all of them.
Sure.
Or rather than bombarding the counterpart with all of them, because then.
Then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I've been doing everything wrong. Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think the opening statement, how you go into each of the parts, is so important.
Absolutely.
Just So those phrases are really good in the book.
Why is it so
I
important?
suppose that, you know, those kind of things, because it's just
Sets the tone.
yeah.
Yeah,
Softens
and if
it
you
a
can
little
only
bit.
remember those phrases, it will just help you so much.
Yes,
You know, transition.
I'll tell you what, to that point, I actually, when it comes to the ask for the others pass, I almost always use pretty much the exact same question, which is, you know, can you help me understand this situation? Or can you help me understand? Oh, yeah. Because I just found that for asking the others pass, that's just that for me, that's a great way to actually get them to be able to feel comfortable with
It's
sharing.
very inviting and it's very polite.
Yeah.
You know, but still asking questions.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna give you a second scenario. This time, though, I'm gonna have you guys rotate. So if you were the facts person, you're now going to be the story person. If you were the story person, you're now going to be the ask person.
We
If
had
you were the
4.
ask person.
Should we, one of us scale out, so?
Yeah. So make sure, add him into the rotation, give him an opportunity to actually take on roles.
I'll rotate out.
Okay, alright, so, and he was asked.
So he can be fact.
I can be fact. Story.
Story.
I'll be the story.
Okay. So you just fact, I'm the actual.
Okay, everybody know what the role is?
Who's the fact?
Okay.
You were the fact?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you were the yes.
Whatever.
I'll be the story then.
Okay, here's the scenario that we're going to be dealing with for this second round. This one is called The Flake. A fellow you work with always gets out of the tough, boring, and repetitive jobs. You're supposed to rotate who cleans up, for example, along with who does the monthly inventory count. Since nobody likes these jobs, you decided as a team to take turns. But this coworker always seems to have something else to do. He's already missed 5 rotations. At first, his excuses seemed legitimate, but now you're almost certain he's missing rotations on purpose. So again, content, pattern, or relationship, and then decide how do you want to present your facts, your story, and the question that you want to ask. Again, I'll give you about 5 minutes to go ahead and work on that together with your team. So before we had these 2 teams partner up, this time we're going to have these 2 teams partner up and those 2 teams partner up. Once again, same thing. You've got fact, story, and ask. Give each team a chance to deliver it as though they were talking to this person, and then give them some feedback when they're done. Let's give you about 6 minutes again to do that. Okay, good. All right, begin whenever you're ready. What questions or comments or additional what questions, comments, additional information can I provide around this skill? Any questions around how that last scenario went?
So it's very helpful to have these questions.
Oh, to have the effective versus,
Yeah.
oh,
You
to
help
the
me
different
because
ones.
that's not something that anybody naturally. So it's helpful.
It's
Some of the videos can be helpful.
some of the ones that we've been watching so far. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you can carry a couple of those videos back, read very easy.
Oh, and take a look at them? Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to vitalsmarts.com, there is actually other videos other than these. There's some additional information, yes. And you can even see some scripts of State My Pass. You can see some additional information in there.
So in PSP we say sustainability. I think that's the biggest challenge we have here.
Yes.
Looks good. We are all in the zone now.
Yeah.
Every week in 2 weeks from now, after the month end or quarter end.
It's definitely worth it's definitely worth reminding yourself about this. So in that back envelope that we were looking at before, you've got those little cards that are little reminders. There's also just one card that has an overview of the model. I always encourage people, put that up in like your cube or on your desk or something like that, just as a reminder.
But there's another thing too, an advice I got from a good friend, and that's this: when you have these conversations, to prepare. I mean, we may not remember everything on Monday, but at least, okay, now I'm having this conversation. Instead of rushing into it, coming out of another meeting, what was it we were talking about? Oh, by the way, you know, then to say, okay, I'm having this on Friday, it's gonna be tough, so I better prepare.
But that's something that I agree with you. You know, if you
And you
prepare.
can't always, of course, but.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's my point. If
Yeah.
you prepare for it, then you've already got your script and you know.
But it's better than not doing
confident.
it all, right?
Oh, absolutely.
At least do for the ones which are planned ones,
Yeah, that
and slowly it becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Someday.
I will say
But
this.
I have this one really, really nice colleague, but that
very fast gets a, you could say gets a temper, can you say that? That's really, so what she's become really good at, if she gets to that level, okay, let's take that some other time, let's stay on that, she doesn't say that, but let's stay on the content, and then let's discuss this at another time, you know, why I'm getting angry, and, you know, because, you know, maybe if she was a little bit offensive to somebody or something.
It's kind of separating out the different
separate.
issues.
That's something she's learned simply to use. So it's quite good.
That's really cool, yeah. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you see the model, so we talked about silence and violence. What's the safety? I don't remember from yesterday.
yes, because we actually haven't talked about that just yet. Yeah. So, in general, kind of as a big overview, when people don't feel safe, they tend to go to silence or violence. So in order to be able to get into the pool of shared meaning, you need to create a layer of safety for people to be willing to share what it is that they have to say. And which is something to check in with yourself when you're delivering this state your path, you know. Am I actually communicating or speaking in a way that's gonna help the person across from me feel safe, feel comfortable sharing their perspective? Because that's what we're trying to do in this, is create that safety for them. The one other thing that I would say,
daily reflection. How effective were you today? And that would be another way to look at it.
of kind of keeping track of and reminding yourself.
This isn't a day one here, like, do you reflect every day about how your day went?
Oh, okay, yeah.
I think that could be another way to bring back this and make it live in our lives forever.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking.
For me, when I think about what you said, Monica, is we have the possibility to practice this every day, at least me at home with my kids. That's clear.
I will say this too.
Opportunity there for you.
Absolutely. So it will be my playground.
Yeah, there you go.
You always be saying at the weekend, did you go on a course?
I will say this.
Help me understand.
I'm really thinking about some discussion that I had. And,
yeah. So the last thing that I would actually say about this particular tool, or the last two things that I would say about it is, number one, like you're talking about when it comes to practice, the more that you actually put this into practice, the more natural it'll feel, the more you'll find language that kind of works for you. Because the first few times you use this, it might feel a little robotic, it might feel a little dry, scripted, yeah. But the more you use it, the more you'll find that ways to make it work for yourself. Sure, yeah, go ahead.
finish your sentence.
Well, I was just going to say, the second thing that I would say as well is that when I first learned this skill, there was definitely a part of me that felt like, well, this might be a way for me to actually deliver a crucial conversation without the other person knowing that I'm delivering a crucial conversation. If I can be so effective, then they won't even know. And what I found, that doesn't really work either. What this really does well is be able to have those important conversations in a really effective way. In fact, my wife is also in the same industry that I am. She's a learning and development person, and so she knows a lot of these skills as well. So there's sometimes a moment, it's interesting, where it's like we're sitting there and we're talking and I'll be eating my dinner, and all of a sudden she'll start saying things to me and I'll go, wait a second, I think she's stating her path right now. And I'll kind of like put my food down and go, okay, this is really important. I have to listen to this. You know? Because what we have learned is that when we actually use these skills with each other, it kind of demonstrates like, this is important, and we know these skills are about having effective communication, and so we really appreciate the other person actually making the effort to use the skills that work in order to have those really important conversations. So you can think of it that way. It might feel a little robotic, and it's about demonstrating on a certain level to the other person that you care enough about them to have an effective conversation.
Greg, is there, sorry, want to ask you?
I was going to say, yeah, we'll go here, and yeah, then we'll go.
My question is pretty clear. I was wondering why we should, in the exercise, recognize if it is a content, a pattern, or a relationship, because it would not have changed anything in our approach to do it. So I was wondering whether the approach would have been different, whether we classify it as content, pattern,
yeah, you know, let's talk about the first scenario that we looked at. Because I know this group over here was having a little bit of debate. Is it a pattern or is it relationship? Did anybody else have that question?
We did.
So let me ask you this. So, well, first let me ask you this. Your teams, how many of you handle this as a pattern issue? In your team? So all 4 teams did. Okay, great. Let's now assume it's a relationship issue. How does that change the story that you're going to tell?
You might say, I've noticed this a few times.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
That's your pattern.
It's pattern, so
Pattern,
that's
yeah.
pattern, you're right.
This is impacting our relationship.
Yeah. So let me dig into that. How is it impacting your relationship? How do you feel about that other person because of this?
Like we can't be honest with one another.
So you would more speak about your feelings, correct?
Exactly.
If it was a relationship.
The story changes because it's not about it's starting to make me think that you're not able to deliver on these things. It now becomes the story that I'm telling myself is I'm starting to question whether or not you feel comfortable talking to me about the issue about these assignments that I'm giving you. And I'm worried that we don't have the kind of relationship where you can be honest with me. So the story changes a little bit when you're talking about a relationship versus a pattern. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Great. Okay.
So, how do we know when in our normal life when we use it? Are we getting effective or not? How do we keep gauging that? You know, if there is a mechanism that, oh, we're slipping down in our effectiveness, or we are really
KPI on it.
you know,
Yeah, there you go. So there's a phrase that I always keep in my mind when I think about communication, and that is your communication is only as effective as the response that you get from the other person. So that's the key indicator for you. Is if I'm effective in my communication, I'll know that because the other person will be going into dialogue with me. Will feel comfortable sharing their point of view. I'll be able to understand their perspective and feel confident that they understand my perspective as well. This is actually going into a little bit about what we're going to be talking about in just a few minutes around what do we do to make sure that the other person feels safe enough to share their perspective. And the first thing that we're going to do is as it says, learn to look, meaning learn to look for those signs that the other person doesn't feel safe in the conversation that we're having.
So help me, give me some scenarios like where it's not getting effective.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not very bad. Some of these are very bad examples. You see, right? The difficulty is when it's not too bad, but still not as effective as it could be. So what are those signs that you get?
Yeah, so I would say like in something like this, if I have a conversation with this person, and maybe in the moment they're just kind of going, okay, everything's fine. And they're kind of giving me very short answers, and I'm not really truly understanding their perspective, then I know, okay, I need to do something different, or I need to apply a different skill to help elicit a little bit more from them. That's one thing. Second thing is, if, at least in this scenario, if you give them another task, and then again, they don't deliver on time and they send that email to you afterwards saying that they didn't, then it's like, okay, clearly that conversation wasn't effective because it didn't change anything. And then we get into what happens is what we call a Groundhog Day conversation, where you've had the same conversation over and over and over again and you're not getting the result that you want. So that's an indication, okay, I need to have a different conversation, or I need to be more effective in what it is that I'm saying. Does that help?
Engagement score.
There you go.
Direct to supervisor effectiveness.
I was gonna say,
That's your favorite.
From 1 year. 1 year. Yeah, I heard you saying sometimes that you do reflection on, and you found yourself slipping into. How do you catch that?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'll be very honest. Here's the thing, and this goes with all the skills that we're learning over these couple of days here, is I don't think you can ever truly get to a place where I'll speak for myself, where I could say, I've got this. I'm a crucial conversation master now. I don't have to worry. I don't have to try anymore because it just happens naturally. I don't think I'll ever get to that point. There always will be something that I can improve on, or do more effectively, or do better. Or sometimes some skills might get out of practice, so I need to remind myself of them. So I think, yeah, just being, if you have a crucial conversation, maybe taking a few minutes when it's over and just on your own, just think to yourself like, okay, how did that go? Could that have gone more effectively? What felt good? What didn't feel good? Am I still feeling stuck? Is there something else that maybe I can do differently in the future? Kind of just always having that cycle of reflection for yourself.
One of the things I've noticed is if you're talking to someone, you're the manager, and before they respond, they pause and then they say, okay, that's not really an okay. And if you end the conversation there, you know you failed because that's not really an okay.
Those cues.
So actually, I want you to remember that exact example because later on we're going to learn a skill called AMP, A-N-P-P, and there's a skill called mirroring that you could use in that exact situation to help get a little bit more information out of them. Yeah. Okay, great. So moving right along, this is our review. This is what it is that we just learned. We've been talking about it a lot. We know it now. So what we're going to do is, as always, we're going to get a chance to get together with our learning partner, and this time what we get to do is think about the conversation that we're going to have with the person that we've been thinking about yesterday and today. And again, just like we did with our scenarios, you get to actually write out, okay, what are the facts that I want to share? What's the story that I want to tell? And what's the question that I want to ask? And your partner will be there to give you a little bit of feedback and let you know if they feel like maybe you're a little too harsh or aggressive, or maybe you're too tentative, or whatever it might be, and give you a little bit of feedback on the effectiveness of your State My Path.
Not gonna give us a break?
After that, then we're going to take a break, I promise. Yeah, I know, we've been here for a while. Okay, so we'll take 10 minutes together, and then we'll take a break.